The following interview was conducted with the intent of providing a mother's perspective on the process of educating students on the autism spectrum. Danielle is the mother of 3 primary school-aged children, 2 boys and a girl. The oldest of her children, a 10-year-old boy, has been diagnosed with Asperger's syndrome. She has recently completed a course in education support. The knowledge gained from this course and her own experiences provide a unique perspective, somewhere in between that of a teacher and a parent of a student with autism. The goal of this interview is to develop an understanding of the ways a diagnosis of autism impacts on a student's education. It further aims to highlight the significance of the development of relationships between the school and parents, in particular the classroom teacher. A series of questions were asked and the responses recorded on video. Editing has occurred in the final presentation to allow the inclusion of academic literature to support the emerging themes. The participant's name and that of her son have been changed to maintain privacy. Full permission has been given to include a video in the presentation and for it to be made available in a public forum. Some of the responses may be edited to enhance the cohesiveness of the presentation. When this has occurred, the main theme of a response has not been altered.
I'm a mother of 3, one who has Asperger's, which is on the spectrum of autism, 2 boys, a girl, 30 years old, currently looking for work, not quite employed yet.
So you've recently completed some education as well. What was that?
Education support, that was my certificate 3, which was just teacher's aid, and also my disability studies as well, which was Cert 4 in disabilities.
Okay. So what was it that inspired you to pursue that particular avenue?
Disability was pursued purely to understand and how further to help Zayn, my son, with Asperger's. Sort of a bit of a curiosity. And then that also led into something that during my volunteer work for my hours for the course, that led into something that I quite enjoyed, so I further pursued that.
So when you went down the path of diagnosis, what was it that made you go down there? Did you have some suspicions yourself, or was it raised by the teachers?
Being my first child, I didn't know any different. So him and his little idiosyncrasies and his routines and breaking routines causing him to have what they call meltdowns. I didn't pick up. I thought, okay, it was just a bit odd. Going on to have my second child, which was my daughter, she was a little bit more easygoing. Again, you sort of think, okay, well maybe that's just gender specifics. Maybe he's a little bit more high-strung than what she is. It could just be their personalities. When he attended school in kindergarten, his teacher... our parent-teacher interviews were a little bit different to everybody else's. We didn't get the classroom interviews. We were sort of, she approached me and said, look, do you mind having a separate interview? We'll go into the front, we'll go into the office.
Were you suspecting something wasn't quite right?
No, not at that stage, no. And then she sort of explained what she picked up on. Now, she was a huge advocate for Aspect, and she also worked closely and did a lot of the kids with disabilities within the school. So she sort of picked it up quite soon when he started, and then broached me about it after observing him in the classroom, and luckily enough she was his actual teacher for kindergarten. So she wrote a letter for the GP, and I took that to the GP, and the GP suggested that if I had any concerns at home, and from her explanation of what autism was and what come along the spectrum, I sort of picked up that, okay, having jam sandwiches for the last, 4 years and had to be in squares, could not be in triangles, colour lining up blocks, sizing up his trucks and things like that.
Everything you thought was regular.
Everything that I thought was just normal play because he didn't attend childcare.
Teachers may be among the first to notice social deficits among their students. Whilst it's important to be aware of the autism spectrum indicators in students, caution must be taken by teachers to ensure a skilled professional makes a formal assessment. The teacher Danielle experienced in kindergarten was compassionate and reassuring when raising initial discussions about her son. Unfortunately, Danielle alludes that not all teachers have had the same level of compassion. When and how such a topic is raised with parents will rest heavily on the foundations of the parent-teacher relationship. Is that a skill that the teacher will need to have that's above and beyond her atypical students?
I think it's...
Or
like
a personality
you said,
issue?
No, I think it's more, like you said, parent-teacher communication. So knowing what the child looks like when it's anxious, or how the child may react to certain situations. Just those little key things that you might pick up on. Zalin tends to be that, and I've received it. Oh, he's fantastic. He finishes his work and then looks for other work to do. No. He will sit there and stare at the walls and stare at the windows and draw in the corners of his paper. He's not looking for other work to do. So knowing the child, really.
Positive relationships between parents and teachers are vitally important. The Organisation for Autism Research describes the home-school connection as a meaningful alliance. During the process of diagnosis, Dunn, Burren and Wolfberg aim to inform teachers of the importance of listening to parents' intuition about their children's development and behaviour. Danielle comments in the interview about her son's teacher, "I can approach her, but she doesn't really listen. This is evidence of a parent-teacher disconnect. Strong lines of communication should be opened between home and school in order to provide a consistent and supportive learning environment."
Not move his things because
Doesn't
he'll have a big tantrum. But what else did he have? In the car, you couldn't just say, let's go in the car, come on, we're going. He had to know where, he had to know how long it was going to be, who we were going to see, where we were going. So you couldn't just say, come on, get in the car, we're going to Coles. Well, how long? What do we need? How much of it? So he wanted to know every little detail.
And did you find that helped when you gave those routines and warning,
yeah.
And this is what's happening, why it's happening, and then we'll be home, and he could handle that?
He could handle it, yeah. Sometimes if you're in a bit of a rush, obviously having two other siblings, if one had fell ill, which my youngest one quite often was, and with hubby being away, it was quite hard to go, come on, we need to get in the car, we've got to go to the hospital. And okay, you didn't have the time to go, the 15 minutes to go, let's go, you were tired, you're exhausted, and you had to get there. So he would get...
Zaylen shows increased anxiety when the classroom schedule is deviated from. It may not always be possible or advisable to eliminate all changes to classroom routines. Students with autism may become anxious when things they expect to be a certain way change. Establishing a written or pictorial timetable may assist students with processing changes to their routine. However, such a schedule is only effective if it is grounded in an understanding of the autistic student's learning profile. Programs such as the TEACH program, when implemented into the classroom, reduce the level of anxiety in autistic students.
You can look at Zaylen and go, okay, he's a normal child. There's nothing wrong with him. Look, he's interacting with everyone else. And it's the same across everywhere. You can see a child in the playground having a meltdown, and all of a sudden you instinctively blame the parents and go, well, he needs a good smack on the bum, or he's just being silly, he's having a tantrum, when in reality he has autism, and it could be a sensory issue, or it could be
difference.
There's a rocket issue and the parent doesn't know. Yeah. So I think I see it, but because my parents, we've been so far away from each other, they don't see quite the little bits and pieces that make up of what's wrong with him. So.
And do you think that's an issue on his behalf of acceptance or of knowledge, so he doesn't quite understand?
I think it is.
Zaylen's additional needs may be overlooked at times because of the nature of his diagnosis. Teachers need to be informed about the signs of autism in order to provide the greatest level of support to their students. In Zaylen's case, his grandfather readily attributes these characteristics to his personality and not the Asperger's diagnosis. He just thinks it's who he is. Dunn, Burren and Wolfberg note a possible desire for social interactions and a lack of cognitive delay in students with an Asperger's diagnosis, As such, the additional needs of these students will not always be apparent to those without knowledge of autism spectrum disorder. Do you have that same level of communication at this school with his teacher at the moment?
No, I don't believe so. I mean, if I need to approach her, I can, but I don't think that things are heard with her, or whether she has quite the understanding that some of the teachers have had in the past.
So is that a personality or a training issue, do you think?
I think that might be a training issue. I know that there's a lot of teachers at the school that have taken some of the training, but I don't think whether or not she's provided with it or whether she's accepted to take the training. But I do believe that the lack of training on her behalf doesn't help.
Else that might prevent that more intensive level of support?
I guess it's interest for the teachers. I mean, teachers need to be aware that this is more common than not. And I mean, as a teacher, you want to learn, you want to teach. You'd think that they would try and learn, even if the school don't provide the training, at least try and research at home or have some sort of understanding, especially when they're looking at a classroom and when they've sorted out classrooms for the year and you sort of realise you've got 1 or 2 or 3 students that have autism or come under the spectrum somewhere. You'd want to learn a little bit more on how to support them as students to help their learning environment.
Without sufficient background knowledge about autism, even the most experienced and intuitive teachers will misinterpret the behaviour displayed by students with autism. This risks damaging both the relationship between student and teacher, as well as the student's ability to communicate. Danielle reports heightened anxiety levels in her son that she believes the classroom teacher is unaware of because of her poor knowledge of autism spectrum disorder. For teachers to be able to respond to the needs of students with autism, they must be equipped firstly with knowledge about autism spectrum disorder and then with the skills to deal with the implications for teaching and learning in the classroom. If I was to tell you that the only reason I'm doing this course is because I've chosen it as an elective for my university degree, what would be your thoughts on that, knowing that many teachers will be qualified who have no experience or very limited knowledge of what it's like to teach an autistic child? Do you think it's acceptable? Is it enough?
No. I think you taking it as an elective is certainly a fantastic thing. It's showing that initiative and being aware of today's society that so many children are in mainstreaming schooling, whether it's highly autistic, having mild cases of Asperger's. It's so common in this day and age, and with schooling they're treated because it's an inclusion thing. They shouldn't be excluded from mainstreaming schools. A lot of them are quite diligent, quite smart. They can function. They shouldn't be sort of shunned into special schools. Their IQ level doesn't require it. So going out and seeking that education to inform yourself on how you can better support a child is fantastic. What I find, I guess, the teachers that have already done their courses and come through without having it, I think it needs to become a school issue where the school need to provide that support for them and to educate their teachers, because you can't tar all kids with the same brush and teach them all the same way.
Varying degrees of acceptance and understanding of autism spectrum disorder was a continuing theme woven throughout the interview. Danielle spoke of her concerns of the level of knowledge teachers had about autism. This idea of understanding was also reiterated when discussion moved to her father's dismissal of the Asperger's diagnosis. This presentation is not positioned to debate the criteria for diagnosis. Rather, it advocates the need for understanding the behaviours of students with an autism diagnosis and the consequent impact of these on the learning environment. During the interview, the communication between parents and teachers were explored. It became apparent that the level of the teacher's knowledge about autism impacts directly on the perception of the quality of the parent-teacher relationship. Danielle associated a lack of understanding with poor levels of both training and interest of the classroom teacher. Danielle reported teachers that were willing to listen to parental concerns in a non-judgmental way created a supportive environment that allowed for the open exchange of communication. The Organisation for Autism Research reports such relationships serve to dramatically improve education outcomes for students with autism and as such should remain an utmost goal. The interview suggests a direction for education that aims to inform teachers about the needs of autistic learners in order to develop the knowledge and skills required for understanding and teaching students with autism. The establishment of positive communication between parents and teachers must be considered an integral part of the process and should be nurtured accordingly. Only when the lines of communication are open can parents and teachers begin to work in a mutually respected partnership.